There are moments in your life where the darkness seems louder than the promise, when betrayal, loss, and rejection feel like they've taken permanent residence in your story, when it looks like everything has been buried, your dreams, your name, your strength, your identity. But let me declare something that is not just a hope, it is a truth. God's next move in your life will be so radical, so unprecedented, it will outshine every lie, every trap, every grave that was dug to erase you. You're not forgotten. You are being positioned. You were never buried. You were planted. And the difference between burial and planting is this. In one, you're meant to be forgotten. In the other, you're destined to rise. You see, people looked at the dirt over your life and thought it was your ending. They whispered that your silence meant your surrender. They assumed that because you were quiet, God was done. But the same God who raised nations from deserts, who called light out of chaos, who breathed into dust and created legacy, He is not finished with you. No, He's just begun. And when God begins something, He finishes it in power, not in pity. He doesn't perform partial resurrections. When He moves to complete, to restore, to elevate, and His timing is never random, it is exact. This next move is not going to come gently. It's going to shake foundations. Because when God decides to reveal what He was working on in the dark, He doesn't whisper, He announces. He doesn't apologize for the glory He places on you. He doesn't need to explain why He saved you from what others thought would destroy you. The same crowd that watched your fall will witness your rise. And they won't just see a comeback. They will see a divine unveiling. Because this is not just about personal recovery. It's about prophetic reversal. Every accusation will be overturned. Every delay will become the very proof of divine strategy. And the people who once overlooked you will have no choice but to recognize what God has authored in your life. When God moves radically, He doesn't consult history. He creates futures. He doesn't ask for permission from the people who counted you out. He overrides opinions with purpose. And when He puts His hand on your life, it becomes impossible to erase your name, because what was once called impossible becomes undeniable when heaven breathes on it. The very things meant to kill you become the soil that nourishes your testimony. The pressure, the betrayal, the rejection, they were all tools in God's hand to build a version of you that nothing could break. I want you to hear me with your spirit. This is not the season of recovery. This is the season of unveiling. The glory that's about to rest on your life is not borrowed. It's ordained. You didn't survive to go back to normal. You endured to become unrecognizable. And what God is releasing now is not just a blessing. It's a statement, a declaration that He never left, never forgot, never failed. His silence was not absence. It was preparation. His delay was not denial. It was divine alignment. And now the weight is breaking open into a move so undeniable, it will silence every voice that ever tried to discredit your purpose. This next move will not only lift you, it will expose what tried to bury you. It will flip the narrative. It will reveal that the pit was part of the process, that the pain was part of the preparation, that the silence was where the anointing deepened, that the waiting was where your oil multiplied. Because God doesn't elevate empty vessels. He pours into the crushed. He strengthens the rejected. He equips the unseen. And when they emerge, they don't walk, they blaze, they don't return, they rise, they don't echo others, they release heaven. So when you see the winds shift, when the doors swing open that were locked for years, when the same mouths that mocked you start speaking honor, don't shrink, don't doubt it, don't apologize. This is what happens when God's radical move crashes through the plans of man. This is what unfolds when heaven says, now. And not even the dirt thrown at you can stop it. Because what's coming is not just restoration, it's resurrection with authority. It's reintroduction with purpose. It's glory born from warfare. It's light erupting from places that once only knew shadows. The God you serve doesn't just restore, He rewrites. And this rewrite will be so radiant, so powerful, so divine. It will become proof that the grave was never your ending. It was your greenhouse. And now you bloom. Not in spite of what tried to kill you, but because of it. That's how radical His move will be. When people saw you disappear, they assumed you were done. When your name went silent in rooms you once had presence, when your face was no longer seen and your voice no longer heard, they thought you were buried. They mistook the quietness of your season for the finality of your story. But they didn't realize that in the realm of the divine, the soil is never the end. It is the sacred beginning. You were not buried, you were planted. And there is a world of difference between the two. Burial is meant to hide and end. Planting is designed to transform and grow. One is about death, the other is about destiny. One signals conclusion, the other whispers of resurrection in waiting. In this hidden season, God wasn't finished with you. He was just getting started in a deeper way. He took you out of the noise, the spotlight, the chaos, not because you failed, but because He was preparing a version of you that could not be built in the open. Some growth can't survive under constant observation. Some strength can only be forged in silence, in solitude, in surrender. The seed doesn't scream while it stretches. It doesn't announce its becoming. It allows the dark to do what the light cannot. It allows the unseen to strengthen the unseen. That's what happened to you. You weren't abandoned. You were covered. You weren't rejected. You were rooted. What others couldn't see was that beneath the layers of obscurity, something sacred was taking shape. Every layer of dirt thrown over you had purpose. The very pressure that was supposed to suppress you only deepened your roots. Because God doesn't just elevate surface level beings, He promotes those who can withstand pressure without losing essence. And He allows the crushing not to destroy, but to draw out what was hidden deep inside you all along. There were dimensions of faith, clarity, and resilience that could only be discovered when everything else was stripped away. God planted you to anchor you before He reveals you. He was making sure your next season of visibility wouldn't destroy the very core He built in private. There are many who bloom too quickly, flowers with no root, rising in shallow soil, swayed by any wind of opinion. But God didn't want that for you. You weren't meant to be impressive for a moment. You were meant to be impactful for a lifetime. So He let the dirt cover you for a while. He let you be hidden, misunderstood, overlooked, because the work being done in you couldn't be rushed. It had to mature. And even though the silence hurt, even though the waiting tested you in ways you couldn't explain, even though it looked like everyone else was moving forward while you were standing still, you were becoming. And becoming is always sacred. You didn't die in the dirt. You developed. You didn't lose your identity. You found your authenticity. And when the right time comes, and make no mistake, it's coming, what was planted will push through every layer of darkness that thought it could hold you down. Because nothing can stop what God has ordained to rise. No lie, no delay, no betrayal can keep destiny from coming into full bloom. The soil you were placed in wasn't a sign of failure. It was evidence that God trusted you with growth that requires depth. He trusted you with silence that builds character. He trusted you with the kind of process that the world may never understand, but heaven recognizes completely. There's a power that comes from being planted. You gain a stillness that cannot be shaken by noise. You learn to discern God's voice without external validation. You become fluent in the language of faith, not just the words of religion. In the dirt, you gained a kind of oil that doesn't wash off under pressure. It increases. You learned how to breathe when the air was thin. You discovered how to stand when no one was clapping. You found peace. Not because everything was right, but because you realized who your source truly is. And now that root system is about to produce fruit that eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, and minds have not imagined. Those who thought your story had ended will be forced to witness a level of growth they never expected. Not because you needed to prove them wrong, but because God always finishes what He starts. And He doesn't just finish it, He establishes it with glory. So if you've ever been through a season where it felt like everything was taken, where nothing made sense, where you were hidden without explanation, don't despise it. That was your planting. That was your moment of divine investment. And when God plants something, it's only a matter of time before it breaks through. What's about to rise from you won't just be proof that you survived. It will be evidence that you were chosen to carry something eternal. Because in God's kingdom, the ones who are planted deep are the ones who rise strong. They don't just bloom, they become rooted testimonies of grace, power, and perseverance. And when the time comes when God says now, there will be no force that can stop what He's cultivated in you through every hidden day, every silent tear, and every buried hope. You were never buried, you were being built. And now the world is about to see what only heaven knew all along. There are moments in life when heaven feels quiet, when prayers echo but answers seem delayed, when divine activity appears distant, and when every door you knock on remains closed without explanation. In those moments, the temptation is to assume that silence means absence, that the stillness is proof you've been forgotten. But what if that silence was never abandonment? It was orchestration. What if God's quietness was not a dismissal of your pain, but a strategic pause to build something that couldn't be rushed? Because divine silence is never empty. It is full of movement beneath the surface, full of designs being mapped, full of alignment being drawn, with a level of precision only God understands. When God goes quiet, it is not because He lacks answers. It is because He is constructing something so intentional that premature revelation would weaken its impact. His silence is not a withdrawal of love, but a deepening of purpose. It is in those quiet hours that the greatest stories are often written, not on stages, not in public breakthroughs, but in private delays. Delays that shape character, refine motives, and strip away anything that cannot carry the weight of what's coming. Because God is not interested in rushed success. He's interested in lasting impact. And for that kind of impact, strategy must take precedence over speed. We often associate movement with noise, results with visibility, favor with immediate answers, but God is the master of divine timing. He can take what looks like a long pause and use it as a foundation for a future that will outlive storms. When you feel like nothing is happening, that's usually when the most is happening, but it's happening in realms your eyes cannot yet see. He's aligning hearts you haven't met, opening paths you haven't walked, and preparing provision you haven't even thought to ask for. Silence in God's hands is not a void, it's a vault. And what's being protected inside that vault is something too precious to be exposed before its time. You may have cried in that silence, questioned your worth in that stillness, even doubted your calling in the absence of confirmation. But even in the silence, heaven was attentive. The silence wasn't a dismissal, it was a dialogue happening in a higher frequency. God was speaking in ways that weren't meant to be heard with ears, but discerned with spirit. Sometimes He hides His hand so you'll strengthen your faith. He delays what you want so you'll discover what you need. He pauses your path so He can purify your motive. He lets things go quiet so the next thing He speaks will have the power to shift your entire atmosphere. If God answered every prayer instantly, if He responded to every cry the moment it was made, we would grow shallow in our trust and dependent on outcomes rather than intimacy. But when He goes silent, He is drawing you deeper, not to punish you, but to anchor you, because what He's building in you must be deep enough to hold what He's about to place on you. A quick word can comfort the mind, but divine silence conditions the soul. It forces you to keep walking even when you don't feel anything. It stretches your faith beyond results and teaches you how to trust the author when you can't read the script. There are chapters of your life that won't make sense until God turns the page. And you may not realize it yet, but the page turning happens in silence. There is a sacredness to divine delay, a beauty to heaven's restraint. For every day you felt ignored, God was preparing a scene where your faith would be rewarded so undeniably that even your confusion will bow in awe. The silence is not a sign that God forgot your name. It's proof that your name is being whispered in places you haven't reached yet. And when He finally speaks again, it won't be a repeat of what you lost. It will be a release of what was reserved. So don't be disheartened by the quiet. Don't let the lack of noise convince you that nothing is coming. The stillness is where foundations are laid so deep that storms can't shake what's built. That silence you're enduring is not delay for delay's sake. It is precision. It is God setting things in place with the kind of excellence that requires time, not just faith. If He had answered you when you first asked, you would have settled for something small. But because He waited, you are about to step into something so divine that the silence will make sense in hindsight. Every unanswered moment, every quiet night, every delayed door, they are not punishments, they are preparation wrapped in patience. And when that silence breaks, it won't be with a whisper, it will be with a shift. A divine unveiling that will make you realize God was never late. He was layering your future with excellence while teaching your soul how to trust when there was nothing to hold on to but His word. And those who mocked your silence will be silenced by your elevation. Because when God finally moves after silence, He doesn't just answer, He reveals that the whole time He was orchestrating glory. There comes a time in your life when the world expects you to come back the same, to return quietly, to slip into the background without raising dust. But when God steps in after a season of crushing and hiddenness, He doesn't just bring you back, He reintroduces you. And this reintroduction is not subtle, it is not timid, it is not just a return to what you were. It is a divine unveiling of what you've become. God doesn't restore you to familiarity. He resurrects you into revelation. And when He does, you don't look like what you went through. You look like what He spoke over you before you ever entered the fire. This next move is not about recovery alone. It is about revelation. It's about God showing the world what He has been building in secret. He's not just repairing your life. He's revealing a version of you that was forged in the dark, refined in silence, and anointed through pressure. What's coming is not just a comeback. It is a divine announcement. It is God saying, this is who I've been working on. You are not returning to fit back into the mold that others boxed you in. You are returning to break it. The you that is rising now has outgrown the expectations of people who only knew you by your past. God's kind of unveiling isn't just seen, it is felt. It carries weight. It silences rumors not with revenge, but with radiance. It doesn't argue with history, it surpasses it. This unveiling is not about proving your worth, it's about revealing your transformation. Those who left you, overlooked you, or misjudged you won't be able to recognize this version of you because they were never meant to understand what God was doing in you. He hid you not to hurt you, but to protect the process. Because had you been seen too early, people would have spoken against what wasn't yet ready. So God covered you, shaped you, and let you evolve where no opinions could touch you. Now that you've survived the silence and endured the shaping, this unveiling is going to carry a glory that speaks louder than explanations. You won't have to defend yourself. You won't have to respond to the doubts. Your becoming will speak for itself. God doesn't unveil unfinished work. He only reveals what has been sealed, sanctified, and strengthened for such a time as this. That's why the unveiling feels so powerful, because it's not just about visibility, it's about timing. And when the timing of God meets the preparation He invested in you, what is released is undeniable. People saw the breaking, but they didn't see the building. They saw the tears, but they didn't see the oil that came from them. They saw your silence, but they missed the sacred conversations between you and God. Now they will see the result, but not so you can boast. They'll see it so that His glory can be revealed through your life. You were never meant to come back looking like the former version of yourself. You were designed to emerge with such transformation that it demands a new level of respect, not because you ask for it, but because what's on you commands it. This unveiling is the manifestation of everything you carried when you had no evidence to hold on to. It's the reward of staying faithful when the process made no sense. It's the result of choosing obedience over popularity. You didn't fake strength, you found it. You didn't wear a mask, you wore faith. And now God is taking what you carried in your private pain and presenting it as public power. But understand this, it's not just a promotion, it's a declaration. God is declaring through your life that nothing can silence what He has anointed, that no pit, no betrayal, no wilderness can cancel what He ordained before you were born. This is the beauty of divine unveiling. It's not flashy, but it's fierce. It's not loud, but it's luminous. It doesn't come to impress, it comes to transform. And those who once pitied you will stand in awe, not because you forced your way back into the light, but because God Himself brought you forward in His timing. You were hidden for a reason, and now you'll be revealed for a purpose. You weren't waiting just to be seen. You were being refined so that when you're seen, you'll shine without burning out. This isn't about reclaiming old space. It's about stepping into new territory. God isn't reintroducing you to comfort zones. He's launching you into unfamiliar realms, rooms you didn't campaign for, platforms you didn't have to manipulate to access. And when you step into them, the evidence of who God is will walk in with you. Because this unveiling is not just about you, it's about Him. It's about what He can do with someone who surrendered to the process and trusted Him in the dark. So as you walk into this next chapter, carry yourself with quiet authority, not the kind that seeks applause, but the kind that knows heaven has already endorsed what earth is just beginning to see. You are not coming back, you are rising anew. And when God unveils what He's been shaping in the silence, nothing that tried to bury you will be able to compete with the light that now rests on your life. When God decides to elevate you, He doesn't ask for permission from those who once rejected you. He doesn't wait for the approval of those who doubted you, nor does He consult the opinions of those who dismissed you at your lowest. When heaven authorizes your rise, it doesn't negotiate with history, it doesn't debate with your past, and it certainly doesn't pause for the comfort of others. God's hand moves with sovereign authority, and when it moves, it overrides every label, every limitation, every lie spoken over you by those who could only see your weakness and never your worth. There are people who tried to confine you to the version of yourself that fit their convenience. They were comfortable with your silence, with your struggle, with your stuck season, because it didn't threaten their own image. But God doesn't shape your destiny around people's preferences. He writes your story based on His own divine blueprint. And when the moment comes that He chooses to lift you, the same mouths that doubted you will be silenced, not by your words, but by His wonders. You won't have to retaliate. You won't have to explain. You won't have to convince anyone that you are worthy of where you are. Your presence in that new place will be enough proof that God doesn't take instructions from man when it comes to fulfilling His promise. There is a kind of favor that doesn't ask to be understood. It simply manifests. It appears in places where you were previously disqualified. It shows up in spaces where you were never invited. It puts you in rooms where others thought your name would never be spoken. And this favor cannot be stopped by human disapproval because it wasn't given by man. It was authored by God. That's why your elevation confuses those who were watching, waiting, and wagering on your failure. They didn't realize they were betting against something eternal. They misjudged your process because they didn't know the promise you were carrying. What's about to happen in your life is not just a breakthrough, it's a divine interruption. It's heaven stepping into the narrative and declaring that you are not to be confined to the stories others wrote about you. God is tearing up the scripts that were designed to limit you and writing new ones that reflect your calling, not your critics. And when He does this, He doesn't ask the crowd if they agree. He doesn't submit your future to a vote. He elevates in such a way that even those who rejected you will have to watch you walk in rooms they said you'd never enter. You see, elevation is never about revenge. It's about recognition. Not the world recognizing you, but heaven recognizing the timing. And when the timing of God collides with the preparation you endured in the shadows, your rise becomes unstoppable. No barrier can withstand it. No bitterness can block it. No betrayal can undo it. God's hand operates in dimensions beyond control, and His favor flows in ways that human hands can neither grant nor grasp. There will be moments when you look around and wonder how you arrived in certain places, how doors opened without effort, how your name reached places your feet haven't touched. And the answer will always come back to this truth. It wasn't you, it was God. It wasn't influence, it was grace. It wasn't politics, it was purpose. And no matter how uncomfortable it makes others, no matter how much it disrupts their assumptions, you will remain because God put you there. And what He establishes cannot be erased by envy. So many people want to be accepted before they ascend. They wait for applause before they move. But those who are truly called understand this. When God promotes, you won't always be welcomed. You'll be watched. You won't always be celebrated. You'll be studied. And that's fine, because your elevation is not a performance. It's a prophetic move. You don't need a stage to be valid. You don't need likes to be anointed. What you need is obedience. And when obedience is married to divine timing, the results are undeniable. The people who underestimated you will be forced to witness the weight you now carry, not to make them feel small, but to reveal how big your God really is. They won't understand it, they might not accept it, but they won't be able to ignore it, because when God puts His glory on display, no amount of resistance can mute its brilliance. What was once hidden will be highlighted. What was once dismissed will be desired. Not because you changed who you were, but because God revealed who you've always been under His plan. This next chapter of your life will not unfold with the approval of your past audience. It will come alive through the authority of your Creator. You are no longer under the jurisdiction of people's opinions. You're walking in the jurisdiction of heaven. And once God has signed off on your name, there's no power on earth that can revoke what's been released. So walk with confidence, not arrogance, but assurance. Because when God lifts you, He doesn't just prove a point, He fulfills a promise. There are things in life that were thrown at you with the intent to silence you, to bury your spirit, to weigh you down so deeply that you'd never rise again. Words spoken carelessly, actions taken in malice, situations designed to crush. Some of these things didn't just happen by chance. They were orchestrated to erase you. But what those people and moments didn't understand is that what was meant to bury you was actually nourishing something sacred within you. Every disappointment, every betrayal, every painful ending, they weren't your destruction. They became the soil in which your purpose began to grow. It's easy to look at the dirt that was tossed on you and feel humiliated or discouraged. It's easy to think that everything was ruined beyond repair. But the truth is, God never wastes a single moment of your life. The very things that tried to bury you became the same things He used to fertilize your destiny. They became the substance through which your roots could stretch deeper, your character could grow stronger, and your faith could develop a new level of endurance. You didn't just survive the dirt, you transformed in it. You see, dirt isn't always a mark of disgrace. Sometimes it's a covering. Sometimes it's a shield. Sometimes it's the exact environment that cultivates the kind of growth that public success could never teach you. What people meant as shame, God used as shelter. What was intended to hide you actually helped protect the development of something divine inside you. Because true greatness isn't built in places of comfort, it's cultivated in pressure. And you've endured pressure that was never supposed to make sense to others, because the depth of your becoming was tailored to a future only God fully understood. You may have walked through seasons where every step felt like a weight, where people whispered about your downfall, assuming that because you were silent, you were finished. They didn't realize that you were not being erased, you were being established. That the mud they threw on your name only helped God press your identity deeper into His plan. The rejection, the criticism, the abandonment, they all tried to define you. But what they did unknowingly was push you further into the hands of the one who always knew how to use pain as a platform for purpose. God is a master architect, and even in the rubble of your life, he saw blueprints. Even in the ashes, he saw potential. That's why nothing thrown at you went to waste. Even the things that broke you became bricks in the foundation of the person you are becoming. Even the seasons that confused you helped carve a level of discernment that now guides your steps. Everything that tried to bury you underestimated the resilience God placed in your spirit. And more than that, it underestimated the strategy of heaven to turn soil into sanctuary. Now, when you look back, you'll begin to understand that those moments of isolation, of heartbreak, of loss, they weren't interruptions, they were intersections. They didn't steal your purpose, they revealed it. Because there are dimensions of your identity that can only be uncovered when everything else is stripped away. When people leave, when titles are lost, when the spotlight disappears, that's when God whispers your real name. That's when you learn that your strength is not in your visibility, but in your rootedness. And what grows in hiddenness is always stronger than what blooms too quickly in the open. So yes, the dirt hurt, the silence was uncomfortable, the betrayal stung, but that wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your transformation. And now you carry a kind of strength that cannot be faked, a kind of peace that was paid for with real storms, a kind of clarity that only comes from walking through fog and still choosing to believe that God was with you. That's why what's growing from your life now is different. It has weight, it has substance, it has oil, because it was watered by tears that no one saw, and it was anchored in faith that refused to break even when everything around you fell apart. People may never know what it cost you to rise again. They may not understand how much healing had to happen in silence, but that's okay. Because what's emerging now will speak louder than any explanation ever could. The fruit that is forming in your life will be the loudest testimony that nothing thrown against you prospered, and every attempt to bury you backfired. What tried to cover you became the very reason you were called out. And now your story will inspire others, not because it's perfect, but because it carries evidence of resurrection. It carries evidence that you were not just saved, you were shaped. You were not just hurt, you were healed. You were not just pressed, you were prepared. So as you continue to rise, know this. You didn't just endure the dirt, you grew through it. And what was meant to be your grave has become your ground. Your foundation is built on seasons that didn't break you, but built you in silence. And because of that, nothing can stop what God is bringing forth in your life, not even the very things that tried to bury you. There's something sacred about the way God allows the very people who counted you out to become the ones who witness your rise. It's not out of vengeance, and it's not about proving anyone wrong. It's about making it undeniably clear that what He ordains, no human opinion can cancel. The same ones who dismissed your worth, who turned their backs when you were in your valley, who thought your silence was your defeat, those very people will be front row witnesses when God unfolds what He has been preparing in you all along. Because when God orchestrates a comeback, it's not subtle, it's strategic. It's meant to make a statement without you needing to say a word. There were people who watched you fall and believed you were finished. They made conclusions based on a chapter they had no authority to interpret. They thought your delay was denial, your struggle was evidence of failure, and your pain was a permanent condition. But what they didn't see was the hand of God working behind the scenes, not only to preserve you, but to prepare you for something far greater than what they expected. They saw your loss, but they didn't see the lessons. They saw your silence, but they couldn't hear the conversations between your soul and heaven. They saw the surface, but God was working in the depth. You never had to broadcast your process. God didn't need you to explain why you were quiet, why you disappeared, why you didn't retaliate or defend yourself. He was teaching you how to walk with dignity in the dark, how to trust without visibility, how to mature without applause. And now He's shifting the entire scene. The people who thought they had the final word on your story will be silenced not by argument, but by elevation, not by your noise, but by your fruit, not by revenge, but by the weight of glory on your life. Because when God prepares a table for you, He makes sure those who opposed you are in the room, not for your ego, but for His evidence. Your rise will not be quiet. It will carry clarity. It will carry power. It will carry something that cannot be denied, even by those who once refused to believe in you. And that's the beauty of God's process. He does things in a way that even your doubters become accidental witnesses to your breakthrough. The same mouths that mocked you will be forced to speak your name with respect. The same eyes that watched you fall will now behold your elevation. Not because you fought for recognition, but because God lifted you in a way no one else could take credit for. You didn't push your way into the spotlight. You surrendered in the shadows. You didn't seek revenge. You chose reverence. You didn't clap back. You stood back and let God write the rest. And that decision, choosing stillness over strife, choosing process over performance, positioned you for a kind of rise that is not just visible, but undeniable. It carries evidence, it carries oil, it carries a sound that silence cannot mute. Because when God promotes, He doesn't just lift you, He validates the process you walked through. He uses the ones who watched you break to confirm that your healing was real. There's a weight to your testimony now, not the kind that needs to be shouted to be believed, but the kind that can simply walk into a room and shift the atmosphere. The weight that comes from going through fire and coming out refined, not burnt. The kind of presence that causes even your enemies to acknowledge that something bigger than man had his hand on you. And when that kind of elevation comes, it doesn't ask for approval. It demands acknowledgement. It's not about revenge. It's about revealing that purpose can't be paused by people's opinions. That destiny is immune to dismissal. God intentionally allows certain people to remain nearby, not to torment you, but to witness what happens when His grace collides with your endurance. So don't be surprised when the very people who once questioned your value are now speechless in the presence of what you've become. Don't be startled when the same ones who whispered about your downfall are now wide-eyed at your rise. It's not for your glory, it's for God's. He didn't forget how they treated you, but He also knew how He was going to elevate you, not to shame them, but to show them who He is through you. You were not just preserved for survival, you were prepared for demonstration. And God's about to demonstrate through your life that no season of rejection, no valley of tears, no wilderness of silence can stop what heaven has written. And those who once turned their backs will now watch with open eyes, not because you need them to, but because God wants it known that His hand has never left your life. You didn't rise through human strength. You rose by divine design. And every eye that once looked down on you will now see what can only be described as a miracle in motion. This is what happens when you trust the process, even when you don't understand the purpose. When you stay faithful, even when it hurts. When you keep walking, even when it's lonely. God uses it all. And in His perfect timing, He lifts you, not in secret, but in the presence of every voice that once doubted your calling. They will see it, not so you can say, I told you so, but so they can say, only God could have done this. Some of the most powerful moments in your life are not when you feel strongest, but when you are crushed and still choose not to quit. When everything seems to press against you, loss, rejection, betrayal, silence, confusion, and yet you continue forward, even if it's with a limp, even if it's with tears in your eyes and weight on your shoulders. That is the kind of strength God honors. That is the kind of spirit heaven responds to, because God doesn't elevate the loudest or the most popular. He elevates the crushed. Those who have been broken but didn't become bitter. Those who were bruised but still believed. Those who were isolated but still obedient. Being crushed isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. It happens in private, in the corners of your life where no one else can see the battles you're fighting. It's not the kind of strength people praise. It's quiet, internal, sacred, but it's in that crushing, In those seasons where the weight of life tries to fold you in half, that something divine is produced in you, the kind of oil that can't be bought or borrowed, the kind of anointing that only flows through pressure, the kind of wisdom that isn't learned in books but birthed in suffering. What people often misunderstand is that pain, when surrendered to God, becomes a platform for transformation. The crushing doesn't come to reduce you, it comes to refine you. It doesn't come to destroy your identity, it comes to deepen it. Because shallow roots can't sustain high callings. So God allows the pressing, the moments that test your endurance, your trust, your patience, not because He delights in your discomfort, but because He knows what's inside of you, and He knows what needs to come out of you before He elevates you. There's a certain depth of character that only emerges through seasons of heaviness. There's a type of spiritual authority that only comes when your soul has walked through fire and still chosen to trust. This is why God doesn't elevate the untested. He doesn't pour heavy mantles on those who have never carried real weight. The crushed know how to carry glory with humility. They don't speak from theories, they speak from survival. They don't just preach hope. They've lived through hopeless nights and still came out with their faith intact. And this is what separates those who are merely gifted from those who are truly called. Gifted people can impress, but crushed people carry impact. Their words don't just sound good, they carry weight because their hearts have bled for what they speak. Their compassion is not artificial, it's authentic, shaped by the pain they've endured. Their discernment isn't just sharp, it's shaped by their scars. And that's why God can trust them with influence, because their elevation isn't rooted in ego, it's rooted in obedience. If you've ever walked through seasons where you felt like everything was caving in, where prayers seemed unanswered, where hope flickered like a candle in the wind, and yet you kept believing, kept pressing, kept serving, then know this: you are the kind of person God delights to use. You didn't break because of the pressure. You were broken open so that something greater could flow through you. And what is flowing through you now, resilience, grace, authority, clarity, is the very thing that is qualifying you for the next level God is preparing. Sometimes we look at others rising and wonder why we've had to endure so much, why the process has been so intense, why the waiting has been so long. But what you don't realize is that what's being prepared for you is not average. God doesn't put deep weight on shallow vessels, and He doesn't waste oil on those who haven't been crushed to receive it. Your pain wasn't a detour, it was a preparation. Your crushing wasn't a punishment, it was a commission. You were being shaped into someone who could handle what others would collapse under. And now, as God begins to open doors, to shift atmospheres, to bring visibility to what He's been doing in you privately, remember where it came from. It wasn't given lightly. It cost you. You had to walk through things that nearly broke you. You had to keep going when everything in you wanted to give up. And now, what rests on your life isn't just a result of your effort, it's a result of your endurance. You made it through what was meant to finish you, and now you carry a kind of depth, a kind of light, a kind of steady fire that only the crushed understand. So walk into this next season not with pride, but with quiet authority, the kind that doesn't shout to be heard because it knows it carries something from heaven. You don't need to prove yourself. The oil speaks. The endurance speaks, the transformation speaks. You are not here by luck, you are here by divine appointment. And every ounce of pressure you endured has prepared you to carry glory in a way that inspires others, not just to admire your rise, but to trust God with their own crushing. Because through you, they will see it clearly. God doesn't elevate the comfortable, He elevates the crushed. There are moments in life when pain begins to echo louder than promise. Moments when you look around and wonder if your faith has been forgotten, if your obedience was overlooked, if all your sacrifice was in vain. And yet, it is in these hidden and heavy places that God begins to write stories the world cannot ignore. Because elevation is not the result of popularity or applause. It's the result of surviving the fire without letting it consume your identity. What you've been through didn't come to destroy you. It came to give depth to your calling. What wounded you did not waste you. It prepared you to walk in something weightier than mere success. It trained you to carry purpose. You see, the highest callings often rise from the lowest valleys. It's not the ones who dance through every season that are trusted with real assignments. It's the ones who crawled when walking felt impossible. It's the ones who showed up when no one was watching, prayed when answers were delayed, and believed when the silence was deafening. These are the ones God chooses to anoint, not because of perfection, but because of consistency. They didn't have everything together, but they never surrendered the altar of trust. They were crushed, but not canceled, bent, but not broken, scarred, but not silenced. Elevation in the kingdom doesn't begin with the spotlight. It begins with surrender. It begins when you learn to worship from the wilderness, when you learn to trust not because things make sense, but because God is still God in the confusion. The weight of your pain, the depth of your struggle, the length of your waiting, none of it is meaningless. It has been building something unshakable in you. God has been constructing a foundation in your soul that can't be toppled by opinion or circumstance. Because what He's about to place on your life requires more than talent. It requires stability. It requires internal strength. It requires scars that have been healed and now glow with wisdom instead of bitterness. You didn't know it then, but those nights of loneliness were sharpening your discernment. That rejection you felt wasn't punishment, it was redirection. That delay you resented was actually divine protection from doors that looked right, but would have broken you prematurely. Every no was connected to a higher yes. And now when God begins to move publicly, it won't be the beginning of your story. It will be the unveiling of what He built in secret. What people are about to see is not what just happened. It's what survived. It's what grew in the dark. It's what was born through crushing seasons of prayer, fasting, patience, and perseverance. You are not rising because you demanded a platform. You are rising because God saw how you stayed faithful without one. He saw how you loved people who didn't love you back. He saw how you forgave what could have justified a grudge. He saw how you carried burdens no one understood and still chose kindness. That's what makes you trustworthy. That's what makes this elevation different. You didn't manipulate your way here. You were molded here. You were built in the fire. And the fire didn't just burn, it branded you. You no longer carry the identity of your pain. You carry the evidence of your survival. This next level won't flatter your ego. It will fulfill your assignment. You've been called to more than applause. You've been called to impact, and true impact can only come from those who understand suffering, because they no longer speak from theory. They speak from scars. They don't need to impress. They carry authority because they've walked through hell and didn't lose their worship. That kind of spirit cannot be faked. That kind of depth cannot be taught. It is earned not through status, but through surrender. You thought your pain was a sign that you were being left behind, but it was actually a sign that you were being carved out for something greater. It wasn't evidence of abandonment. It was proof of preparation. Heaven saw what you endured and said, "This one can carry what others would waste. This one knows how to bend without breaking. This one has learned to trust me even when it hurts." That's who God is about to elevate. The quiet ones. The consistent ones, the ones who sowed in tears but never stopped believing in harvest, the ones who kept building when no one saw the blueprint, the ones who had every reason to walk away and still stayed faithful to the call. So when the shift comes, and it will, remember it didn't come because of perfection. It came because you endured. It came because you didn't give up when you could have. It came because you proved to heaven that you're not just gifted, you're grounded, and God will always breathe on the grounded. He will always lift the one who bowed low. He will always trust the one who wept in private but still worshiped. What's about to rest on your life won't be a promotion in the natural. It'll be proof that the crushing didn't disqualify you. It qualified you. It wasn't a detour. It was divine design. And now what rests on you is not just purpose, it's permission to rise. There is a vast difference between recovery and resurrection. Recovery is when something broken is repaired, but resurrection is when something deemed lifeless is revived with new power, new vision, and new authority. What you are about to step into isn't a mere restoration of what you lost. It's not a return to how things were. This is a divine reintroduction, an unveiling so powerful it will silence every shadow that tried to name you by your past. God isn't just patching up your story. He's writing a new chapter so glorious, the old pain won't even qualify to stand beside it. You didn't survive just to return. You endured so you could rise with insight, with strength, with a voice that carries weight. The places that once mocked your silence will now witness the sound of your elevation. You were hidden not because you were forgotten, but because God was forming a version of you that could no longer be defined by weakness or disappointment. He was breaking the limitations, shaking the dust off your identity, and stirring a dimension of power in you that only the grave could cultivate. Many saw your fall, they saw the doors shut, they heard the whispers, they may have counted you out, but what they didn't know is that God allowed the breaking not to embarrass you, but to bury the parts of you that couldn't walk into this next season. He wasn't just repairing your wounds, he was resurrecting a version of you that hell fears and heaven has been waiting to reveal. This isn't about you bouncing back to your old rhythm. It's about stepping into a cadence that is completely heaven-born, marked by clarity, discernment, and boldness. This next move will not look like your last breakthrough. This one is clothed in resurrection power. It carries a sound, a fragrance, and a presence that cannot be manufactured. You're not just being healed, you're being handed a mantle, one that cannot be stolen, copied, or imitated, because it came from the graveyard of your greatest pain. You didn't read this in a book. You lived it. You wept through it. You questioned God through it. But still, you didn't walk away. And now, what's coming is not simply a reward. It's a release of what was always inside you, waiting to be awakened by the fire. You're about to stand in places that once felt unreachable. You're about to speak with wisdom no classroom could teach. You're about to walk in favor no resume can explain. Why? Because this is not recovery. Recovery is about regaining strength. Resurrection is about receiving new identity. You have crossed over. You no longer carry the aroma of survival. You now carry the mantle of someone who has wrestled with death, doubt, delay, and defeat, and came out clothed in fire. When you rise this time, it will be different. The weight will be different. The clarity will be different. The peace will be undeniable. Not because the storm didn't touch you, but because it couldn't stop what God placed in you. This reintroduction isn't about proving anything to people. It's about manifesting what God already confirmed in private. There were things spoken over your life that didn't match your reality. Promises that felt delayed, dreams that felt buried, prayers that seemed ignored. But God was never late. He was simply waiting until you could rise, not with revenge, but with revelation. Now you understand that the delay developed you, that the heartbreak purified you, that the silence deepened your discernment. So when He places you before people again, you won't speak from frustration, you'll speak from fire. The resurrection anointing doesn't come to those who only seek comfort. It comes to those who endured the silence, the shadows, and the stillness, and kept trusting. You have been forged in the fire. You've been marked by mercy. And now, when God reintroduces you, no part of your past will have the power to chain your future. You won't carry shame. You'll carry stories. You won't carry regret. You'll carry revelation. You won't need validation. You'll move in vision, because resurrection doesn't make you what you were before. It makes you something you've never been.